Welcome to the Friday Night Drive podcast, South and West Edition. He's Shaw Sports Regional Editor, JT Pedelty. I'm Daily Chronicle Sports Editor, Eddie Carifio, and want to thank you for joining this podcast, which has been described as the equivalent of a 5-3 football game. I take that as a compliment, honestly.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Can we just talk about that game nonstop? I know it's out of our area. I don't know how much the mothership talked about that. Sandburg 5, Naperville Central 3. For 5 days now, it is not. I thought about it at least 3 times a day.
Is that high school scoregami?
You would have to imagine every possible score for a football game has been hit at this point with how many high school football games have ever played.
Yeah, you would think. And I know sometimes you see some weird ones in those old ones, some 2-0 or 4-2s, or that's my first 5-3. I know that. To not only have a game that low scoring is rare. To have 2 teams that can kick field goals is less rare than it used to be. But 20 years ago, usually 2 teams didn't have a kicker who could nail a field goal very often. And then also to have like a safety be the difference. That's your trifecta right there.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see any 5-3 games this week. I'm going to go out on a limb. I know I've been wrong about a lot of stuff here lately. We're riding a cold streak with last week's episode. But I don't think there'll be a 5-3 game, and I feel confident going out on that limb.
I think so. Yeah, we praised the Interstate 8 conference last week, and here we are. Interstate 8, by and large, had a pretty rough week 3 with the exception of Morris, who all of a sudden you got to kind of be like, with Morris, kind of after those results. We'll get to all that, but I would say the Interstate 8 kind of we didn't hit on exactly everything we were hoping to there.
Yeah, which might as well start there while we're at it. In fact, probably the 2 teams we're referring to most of all there, Rochelle and Sycamore, they meet up. Both suffered, I would think, surprising losses, at least for both of them in a week. Last week, you got Rochelle coming off a loss to a very good 1A team in Leroy Winslow, but also a 1A team that had just lost to a Stockton team the week before. You got Sycamore that lost to Mehmet Seymour, handily their worst loss in 8 years, something like that.
Some of those schools with 2 names just give you trouble.
Those darn co-ops.
Lena Winslow, Muhammad Seymour.
Maybe that's all that it was last week.
It's okay. Everyone knew who you were talking about. Yeah, 2. I think you called me out on Twitter for using the eyeball emojis as updates were coming in. I was like, "Is that happening? Yeah, a couple games that really surprised me, and not that Muhammad Seymour and Lena Winslow aren't great programs. They are, but not results people expected, and not as even if an upset did happen. I think it was 20-7 Rochelle lost, and 45-16 Sycamore got it handed to him, which is a big surprise and kind of a eye-opener when we talk about what's going to happen down the stretch here at Interstate 8, because that Muhammad Seymour team's a team that Morris handled pretty handily earlier this season.
Yeah, obviously it was a big win for them, for the Bulldogs. They avoided their first 0-3 start since, I think their coach had said, 1989, I want to say. I mean, this was their first 0-2 start, even in, I think it was more than a decade. And they avoided their first 0-3 start and even longer. So, I mean, obviously a big win for that program coming on the win and avenging that loss. But that leads us to Rochelle and Sycamore facing each other this week. Probably a lot more critical of a game for the Spartans, I would say, coming in 1-2. Rochelle is 2-1. Obviously, both teams need this. You're probably going to need to go undefeated to win the I-8. So a blemish hurts you there. And Sycamore dropping the 1-3 potentially with this loss, with Morris and Canelan still lurking there. It could be rough. This is a huge one for them to have to circle the wagons.
Yeah, I mean, Rochelle has a back-to-back Morris Canelan coming up in a couple weeks. They close with a Waterloo team that's 2-1. So they gotta stack wins when they can. And Sycamore, I mean, boy, I'll be honest. I never thought I'd be saying, man, Sycamore might be in trouble before they even started conference play, but. You look at their schedule, they have 1 win. They Ottawa and LP are kind of the 2 bottom teams in the I-8, or at least coming into the season. That's what most people thought. So, that gets you to 3 wins. They got that Cahokia team they finished with. That's 2-1. I don't know much about them other than they're down south, right?
And it was a very lopsided win last year for Sycamore.
Yeah.
I can't remember the score exactly. I think they run and clocked them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Muhammad Seymour was a win last year for
That's true.
and this year it was a 29-point loss. So yeah, I don't know. I'd never in a million years thought I'd be saying, man, Sycamore really needs to get a win here. But when you look at their schedule down the way, you don't want to get in a place where that matchup with Canelan you have to win, or week 8 they go to Morris. You don't want to have to win that game just to get into the postseason, to keep your hopes alive. So this is a really big one for Sycamore, and honestly, a big game from Rochelle, because for Rochelle's point of view, they have to be thinking like Morris is, hey, the Interstate 8 might be wide open if Sycamore's not quite the team they were.
Yeah, Sycamore. Oh, Rochelle should also point out last week they weren't helped by missing a couple of linemen. I think their quarterback also got hurt. I believe one of the linemen's supposed to be back. So it could be a little interesting from that standpoint. I don't like betting against Sycamore, especially over the long term. But it's a tough position they're in, especially if they lose this game. So we'll see again how they circle the wagons, how they rally around. But it's one of those. Man, I got a bad feeling about this.
Well, And it's not just bad for them, wherever Sycamore falls in the playoff field with kind of would they be a 6A? What's the way
5.
That 5? I never know with Seuss kind of how teams are moving around. I guess if anything, they drop down.
I haven't checked, but they've been 5A and solidly 5A for a very long time.
Yeah,
one of those.
Yeah, if anything, they drop down a level, not go up with the whole private school non-boundary multiplier thing. But yeah, they that other thing, just kind of another twist on this. If we talk about trouble for Sycamore, let's say Sycamore does end up 5-4 and gets in the playoffs, they'll have a decent amount of playoff points because they're in that Interstate 8 conference, played a good non-conference schedule. How'd you like to be a 9-0 and get to have Sycamore come to town, week 10? That's things like that always interest me when good teams have down years, I remember, a few Geneseo teams that would sneak in at 5-4 a couple years ago. Didn't Sterling, I think, went in at 4-5 and won a opening round game. So, that's
Sycamore went into the playoffs 5-4 a few years ago. It was in the mid to late teens, and they made a semifinal run that year. That might have been 2016, I think. They made a run into the semifinals, going 5-4 in the regular season. So definitely not a team you want to count out. Like I said, my spidey sense sort of tingling, but I'm wrong about everything. So, but we'll see this week. This week will show us a lot about both of these teams, I think.
Yeah, and I know we're going to circle back to the Interstate 8 when our guest joins us here in a little bit, but I was going to real quick, kind of in between, we can talk real quick about one that involves teams from both of our markets.
It's not an I-8 game. Usually
not I-8.
Ottawa Sycamore.
Perennial play. You know what? Actually, Kevin is here with us, so why don't we bring him in, and then we'll jump back to that Seneca Genoa Kingston game. Kevin, how's it going, man? Good morning.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. We were just talking. The Interstate 8 had kind of a rough week last week. LP obviously got that win over Ottawa in a non-conference meeting. Their conference meeting will be here in a few weeks, but by and large, and Morris. Yeah, as we're about to talk about, kind of slayed the dragon that is Peoria High that's haunted them for the past few years.
And Canelan did pick up a win, too. So when we say the I-8 struggles, we're mostly focusing on those various surprising
Rochelle, Sycamore. Well, there's only 6 teams. So, I mean, when 3 of them lose, after the start they got off to, the I-8 going 3-3 last week, that was a down week for them. So, but the sky is not falling, Chicken Little, which has probably been one of your Twitter handles over the years.
Probably.
The Carifio little whatever. So anyway, Kevin, you know what? Talk a little bit about LP. I wanted something that's kind of doesn't happen a lot down here. A couple things, and they all involve LaSalle Peru's quarterback. We had a Friday Night Drive Team of the Week MVP. I got to present him the belt and whatnot, and talk to LP's quarterback Marion Persich, and also. He took to Illinois. I think he took a D1 visit and has another one coming up to Northwestern on game days. Is that right?
Yeah, Marion Persich. He went to Illinois on Saturday for the game. He said it was a good visit down there. He had been there previously in April, and then he's going to Northwestern on October 4th for their game. So he's getting a lot of interest already. He's only a sophomore, but you've seen him play. It makes sense. I mean, the kid's 6'3", 215 pounds. And he has the arm. He's pretty accurate with his throws, and he can run. So he's a great dual threat quarterback, and he's really hard to tackle, which is something that I've really, been impressed by so far this season is if he gets pressure when he's trying to pass or if it's a design run, you need several guys to bring him down. One person's not going to bring him down.
And I'm sorry, Marion, for calling you Marion for the past few months. Marion, I will remember that. And the other thing with him, I got to see him, this last basketball season, which, he's one of those kids who's just an all-around fantastic athlete. But, we don't get a ton of down in our cornfield podcast, as we jokingly call it. We don't get a ton of Division I athletes, even fewer Division I quarterback prospects. But I mean, he just seems to have kind of all the tools and everything, and he's going to have a chance to put them on display against a really good football team this week.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes against Morris. I mean, Morris has played a really good schedule and undefeated against that schedule. LP, they lost our first 2 games, but they looked good last week, but it was against Ottawa, a team they've kind of handled over the last decade or so. So we'll see what happens when they step up in competition. LP has had a little struggles protecting Marion in the passing game. UT, when I was there, saw that game. They got quite a bit of pressure on him. It didn't really affect him too much because he was able to escape it and run. But a team like Morris, that's a team that probably can get to him and sack him. Like they struggle a bit with that against Metamora as well, which is another good team they lost to in Week 2.
One thing, Kevin, isn't it right? I think something like LP scored, correct me on the numbers if I'm wrong, but like LP scored 11 touchdowns and Marion's been involved in 10 of them, either throwing them or running them in, something like that, right?
Yeah, he's run for 8 touchdowns already, and he's thrown for 4, so he has 12 touchdowns total.
So 12, and I think LP as a team might have 13, so that's something like that, something close to that. So yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I'm just curious, and I assume you've seen them a lot. Is there another weapon ready to step up there that's just kind of waiting for a breakout, to help complement him a little bit?
In the passing game, they have a receiver named Logan Zellers who's been pretty solid this year. He's kind of like their deep threat. He's made a few big catches against UT when I was there. He had a touchdown last week against Ottawa. And then they have another kid, Jaron Morsheiser. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but he's a big kid. He plays tight end, but he kind of splits out a little bit. He's 6'3", about 190 pounds. He actually has a twin brother as well on the team, and they're both linebackers and tight ends. But Jaron has a couple of touchdowns this year as well. So those are his 2 main weapons in the passing game. On the running game is pretty much Marion, although last week Easton Moriarty ran for 84 yards. So maybe he's emerging as like an actual running back threat for LP.
Because it seems like, especially if they could get another person to run the ball, even, for like an 84-yard type performance, or not even maybe even that much, just something to take some of the pressure off. One of the things, in fact, I just asked John Solly in the chat here, I was curious about, he orchestrates a lot of stuff for FND and the Team of the Week stuff. No one's ever won the belt 3 times. And Marion's only a sophomore, right? So...
Yeah, he's always a sophomore. I don't know if you saw his video yesterday, but he brought his other belt. So he had a belt on each shoulder yesterday after I presented him the second one. So I thought that was pretty funny that he had 2 already, and he had 2 more years to go. His coach, J.J. Rapison, was joking afterward yesterday that he's going to win 5 belts before it's all said and done. So we'll see if that comes true.
Marion 2 belt. Got to be like some WWE people walking around with like the belts from Japan and Mexico and everything all over their shoulders. One thing with LP, and then we'll talk a little bit about Morris and then transition out. But one thing about LP, you're only a third of the way through the season. They're coming off a win, and you look, and it's kind of tough to envision unless they can beat a Morris or beat a Rochelle, beat a Sycamore, which we were just talking. Is Sycamore vulnerable? Maybe. But there are. It's tough to envision a path to the playoffs here. You're only a third of the way through the season, but they had a 2-point loss to United Township. A 12-point loss to Metamora, which was maybe a little closer than that final score indicated. So you kind of sit there. Those, everyone on their schedules is a combined 7-2 that they played so far. And you look down who they have coming up, and it's 3-0, 2-1, 2-1, 1-2, 3-0, 1-2. It's tough to envision unless they can get one of these games, like beat a Morris, beat a Rochelle, beat a Sycamore, beat a Kalen. I mean, they almost have to get certainly 1, if not 2 of these, right?
Yeah, that loss to United Township kind of put them in a hole early on, because usually that you count that as a win. Like LP had won 14 times in a row against them. So I would think most people counted that as a win ahead of time. The UT is pretty good this year. So maybe Rochelle is vulnerable as well. I mean, they lose to a 1A team last week. I know it's Lena, who's a fantastic 1A team, but it's still a 4A losing to a 1A team. So maybe LP is able to compete with them because LP has been pretty competitive against Metamora, who's good. And like Eddie said, maybe Sycamore is vulnerable, although LP has never beaten Sycamore. So I'm not sure I'd be counting on that as a win. But we'll see what happens. They have O'Fallon at the end of the year, who's 1-2. But last year O'Fallon came in 1-8, 1-7 against LP, and they beat them because O'Fallon plays a really tough schedule. They have like East St. Louis and some things like that in the schedule. So the record is not good, but they're not a bad team usually.
Yeah, good news about playing a tough schedule is, Steve Susi, I believe he just projected that he thinks some 4 and 5 teams. The early indicators are we might get some 4 and 5 teams in again this year. Get at large bids to the postseason. If that is the case, LP should have a lot of playoff points. So that's good. Kevin, would you be cool sticking with us while we go through a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about a surprising, well, I guess they're 1-2 now, Princeton team, but a Princeton team that hasn't won a football game on the field yet. Kind of a shocker, but we'll take a break and come back and talk about that.
Sounds good.
I'm State Representative Steve Reich. Since 2017, I've led the fight to reform our child welfare system and supported educational choice for every kid in Illinois. I've worked to stop the collapse of our public pensions while standing up for businesses that are being crushed by crippling mandates. And I've never forgotten who pays the bill. The work isn't finished, and as I run for re-election, I'm asking for your support. I'm Steve Reich, and I approve this message.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
I might have to try and get him to throw the Vermilion River in that little Shaw Media thing. I live on the banks of the mighty Vermilion. Growing up, they always said it was one of like 3 rivers in the world that grew north. It was one of the things that that you tell streeter kids to make them feel special. There's way more than 3 rivers that flow north, but it is sort of rare. Anyway, welcome back to the Friday Night Drive podcast. Kevin, we talked a little bit that we were going to talk a little bit about Princeton. This is a team that they come off that surprise forfeit at the last minute from Sherrard. They kind of had low numbers and illness going through the school. So Princeton found out they kind of had a bye week. Nice chance to reset, but that's after going 0-2 against 2 tough opponents the first 2 weeks. I mean, we talked about LP's path. Princeton, I would think, is still very much alive to be a force, coming down the stretch and into the postseason, right?
Yeah, I would think Princeton's still pretty much guaranteed to make the playoffs. I mean, if you look at the upcoming schedule, Kewanee this week should be a win. Kewanee struggled. They're 0-3. They have Hall, who's 1-2 in 2 weeks. Mendota, Mercer County, all have losing records. They do have Monmouth Roseville next Friday night. That could be a tough one. They're 3-0 against some tough teams, and they beat Princeton last year. So I would say that's their toughest game left. And then in week 9, they still have Erie Prophetstown, who's been pretty solid this year.
So what's been going on with Princeton? I mean, just kind of, I know Kevin Hieronymus kind of is the one on the sideline at most of those games, but you live in Princeton, right? I mean, what is kind of the vibe around the team? What is kind of the, do they feel like they're down, or just kind of the victims of a tough start to the schedule and some bad luck?
I mean, they did lose quite a bit from last year, especially on the line. So I think that is showing up. They did make a big change on the offense. They're running a single wing this year. So they're basically not throwing the ball at all. They will have 35 passing yards through 2 games on 11 attempts. So I think there's some adjustment to that. It's a whole new system. And like I said, 2 tough teams. I mean, Rockridge is number 2 in 2A, and Newman's number 3 in 1A. They're combined 6-0. So I think that's all part of it. And I mean, they were right there with Rockridge. I mean, they gave a touchdown with less than a minute left. So I think they're attributing it more to a tough start and just need to correct some mistakes. And I think they'll be fine going forward.
I'm a big believer in their head coach, Ryan Pearson. Worked with him when he was down in Flanagan for a couple of years. Great guy, great football mind, and just a great motivator of young men. So I feel confident, like you do, that Princeton's going to turn things around. And, like we talked a little bit about Sycamore, Princeton sitting there with 2 losses. Maybe they drop one here. It's a tough one in a couple weeks here. You're 6-3. And like we talked about, let's say you go 8-1 and you get a first, hey, we get a home playoff game. I can't wait to sit down Saturday and watch the show. And, who pops up all against you is, oh, Princeton's coming to town. Great. It's a tough place to be, tough spot to be in. But, yeah, I definitely agree. Some better times coming down the road for Princeton.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll work out better for Princeton because the last several years have been 9-0 or 8-1, and then they end up running into a Montini or IC Catholic in the quarterfinals. And maybe somehow if they go in 7-2 or 6-3, the path takes them not them to the semifinals or something. Who knows how it's going to work out, but it could turn out.
We have Susie to figure that stuff out.
Yeah, he can do all that math.
I was going to say I could make a suggestion here. This is my first entry for the district talk was right now, but I will once again pass just merely pointing out that this was an entryway into that.
Well, this is also an entryway into our eliminator picks, Eddie.
Since you got a literal free win last week with Princeton, picked Princeton over Sherrard before we knew it was going to be a forfeit. Like literally,
before you knew.
Was that
before you knew?
Oh, well,
no,
okay.
I'm just kidding.
Well, then, well played, sir. Well played. And then I'm trying to find the picks here. I had gone with Dixon over Rock Falls. That I think was 70-0. I want to say was the final of that one. So that was that right. And then our Sam last week on the show, he was guest picking and did Stillman over Rockford Lutheran, and that one also came true. So all our streaks are still alive right now. JT, you want to do yours first?
Yeah, I hate doing this picking against the hometown team, but I'm going to take Coal City over Streeter. Coal City with the teams it's played and the success it's had, even in a close loss to Richmond Burton is kind of impressive. So it's really hard for me to come up with a scenario where Streeter jumps up and catches Coal City. I hope they give him a good game. But it's tough picture and them winning. So I'm going with the Coal.
Are you okay? You need a hug or something? Or it's okay.
After the dirty looks I get around town.
I'm going with Lewin over Dakota. Obviously, we know what they did last week with that big win over Rochelle. The loss to Stockton obviously was a tough one, but Dakota, I think, has also been they have 3 extremely lopsided losses. I believe all 3 of them have been running clocks this year. So I'm going up into the NUIC. I'm going again, not as exciting. I thought about flirtingly went with going with DeKalb over Stagg. I know Stagg has really had their troubles. I know DeKalb's off a tough loss. Thought about going in that direction, but wanted to play it super duper safe, even though I do think DeKalb comes away with a win this week to get back to 500. We'll count this as talking about them. I do think they come away with the win this week to get back to 500, but I'm for my eliminator, I'm going Lewin over Dakota. Kevin, you got something for us?
I do. I feel like the pressure's on since the guest picker has been perfect so far this year, but I'm going to stick in the track, and I'm going to go with Monmouth Rosa over Mendota. Mendota has lost 15 games in a row. I thought maybe last week they would have a shot against Hall. They were competitive against Newman in week 2, but last week they only had 88 yards of offense, scored only 1 touchdown, and an 18-6 loss to Hall. Their defense has been pretty solid, but the offense is struggling. They were shut out week 1. Like I said, only 88 yards last week. Their quarterback got hurt in the first half last week. I'm not sure he's going to play or not. And Monmouth Rosa has been impressive. They've outscored their opponents by 138-49 so far this year, and I don't think they're going to get upset by Mendota this Friday.
Kevin and I both picking teams in our market, so keep the windows rolled up if people got tomatoes from their garden to throw at us. So,
hey, it makes the eventual upsets all the more sweeter, right? Yes. Or something, I don't
know. Well, Kevin, thank you for jumping on with us this week, talking a little LP and Marion Persich. Kind of really just interesting, fascinating player. I'm can't wait to see kind of how he matches up as a sophomore against a really good team on Morris. Performances like that put on film just jump up your stock if he can have a good performance against a team like that. So hopefully the Cavaliers can stick with Morris and he can have a big game.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I know Mariano's pretty confident. Yesterday when I talked to him, he thought they could, after a good week of practice, could be competitive in that game and also next week against Rochelle. So we'll see what he does.
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, now we can head back up this way for one of those crossover games we were getting ready to talk about, the Seneca GK game. If that's all right with you, sir.
Absolutely. I was excited to talk about this game. I jumped the gun trying to talk about it before we were supposed to. So, yes, I'm all about it.
No, it's interesting. GK started 0-2, couple close losses to, like we talked about, some of those teams in the top to the middle of the BNC pack that are going to probably be in that 4, 5, 6 win range, including GK in that, figuring where they all land. And they lost both of those. Needed a win against Winnebago, got it handily. Think they secured the running clock in that one. It ended up like 42-16 or something like that, but was like I said, running clock. So Seneca has been a lot more 3-0, I believe, coming in, correct?
Yes. Yeah, they've been rolling over everyone, coming off a 50-0 shutout of Clinton down in Clinton. Seneca rushed for 419 yards, led by Cam Shrees, 199 yards on just 11 carries. They spread it around. I did notice in your notes you talked about Genoa Kingston going to a gun T offense where they throw almost 30% of the time. Seneca's still in a wing T, power T offense. Terry Maxwell's power T offense, where they throw almost 13% of the time. Might be closer to almost 3% of the time. So,
I would have, yeah.
Yeah. So
that's what GK, like I've covered GK games where they literally didn't throw a pass.
Yeah.
And like I don't cover GK a ton, once, twice a year, maybe a little more back in the olden days when we had 2 reporters here. But there are games like there was never a game where they threw it more than 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, this is a game we talked about when we did our preseason podcast when the schedules dropped as kind of one, that just, Seneca just loaded up with playoff teams for their non-conference. I don't believe Clinton was, but I think other than that, every non-con that Seneca added this year was a playoff team last year. They really load up the schedule, and so far, I mean, they've just been dominant against the schedule, kind of running roughshod over, a defending state champion over. So we'll see how they do, going up to Genoa Kingston, facing the Cogs. If Seneca can keep it going, then next week they jump into their Chicagoland Prairie schedule.
Yeah, if we're picking, I'm going Seneca in this one. I think that's a smart one. I think there's definitely a path for GK to win it. Their defense has been very consistent this year. I think they've played a couple good offensive teams and holding them in the 20s. So it's not like it's been a lockdown defense, but it's been solid. I would think is probably the best word, or, really good, somewhere in that, 6.5 out of 10 sort of range. Obviously Seneca's offense is probably a little higher than that, though.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I wrote this in our previews, available now on Friday Night Drive. Read all about the games, before listen to us talk about it, then read our thoughts, and
we didn't push the website yet 30 minutes in.
I know that's bad. It's horrible of us. But I wrote in there, and it's becoming apparent that Seneca's, they've kind of built this. Terry Maxwell's built this program on their line play. And it's becoming pretty apparent that these linemen can stand shoulder to shoulder with the ones that came before them. A couple years ago, they graduated a lot, and it was kind of like, okay, we're replacing a lot of this line. How will we do? And they did well because they had a lot of skill position players back. This year, not as many skill position players back, but I think the lines are just dominant. So, that spells trouble for anyone you line up against. But we'll see how Genoa Kingston stacks up with them.
Yeah, should be an interesting game. Either way, I believe Hawks is up here, is he not?
Yes.
So coverage will be on FridayNightDrive.com.
Yes,
and a great write-up from the man himself. So that should be a goodie.
Well, let us hope.
I
said, just a good game is what you're, a good one to write about. That's what you want. But no matter what, the story will be great. And then a couple other Chicagoland Prairie teams, Marquette and Dwight, are playing their actual conference game. Marquette comes in 1-2, Dwight 2-1. Marquette's 1-2 is not a bad 1-2. They lost to Aurora Christian in week 1. And then last week they met Edgar, Wisconsin, halfway between Ottawa, Illinois, and Edgar, Wisconsin, and lost 9-6 on a late field goal. And that's a state champion in Wisconsin, small school state champ. So Dwight, meanwhile, coming off their first loss, a 51-48 shootout down in Shelbyville. That's the thing I find interesting about this game is Marquette does not give up points. Dwight scores a lot of points. And Marquette can score points in bunches last week against the state champ, out-of-state champ excluded. Marquette, scores a lot of points, and Dwight is giving up 32.5 points a game. So a lot of those key matchups when this team's on the field and this, I would think Dwight would love to have a shootout, and Marquette would love to keep it low scoring, but it should be a really good game to kick off conference play.
This does seem like an interesting one if you look at it. I'm curious what your feel on how this one turns out is, because obviously I'm a little more limited in my knowledge of Marquette and Dwight, but I'm it's like this, like from where I'm sitting, seems like it would be a hard one if you were making me pick it.
Yeah, I think so, and I have the luxury with some games that I don't have to make a choice because Seuss is the first one that gets all his football little preview capsules in, and Dwight is one of the teams that is in that Joliet Morris coverage area as well as mine. So he already had it in. He already picked Marquette. So made it real easy for me to pick Marquette. If you made me, I'm with you. I'd flip a coin. Dwight does so many things well. And this is a possible playoff matchup preview. Dwight looks like a team that's going to slide down to 1A this year. Marquette is, I think, the smallest playing 11-man football school in the state. So you can give them all the multipliers you want. They'll still be in 1A. Multiply them twice, I think, and they might still be in 1A. So, I think this is a flip a coin game in my mind, and going to be a really, really good one.
Another really good one down that way, looks to be anyway, Wilmington and Herscher.
Yeah, Herscher. The Tigers are kind of one of those teams. When I was doing our preview for FridayNightDrive.com, there you go, twice, Eddie. But when we were doing our summer previews, looking at conferences, talking to coaches, the one thing that kind of kept coming up was, maybe keep an eye on Herscher. Herscher's kind of one of those ascending teams that kind of people were talking about a little bit. And so far they've lived up to it. Their only loss is to Bishop Mack, who's 3-0. They held off Mantino, returning playoff team, 28-23 last week with a late stop. That was one of the teams that finished ahead of Herscher last year in the ice standing. So, I'm not going to say that Herscher's going to beat Wilmington. I think they've got a lot more to prove before anyone's going to be saying that. But this might be a sneaky good game, and a chance for Herscher to kind of show they belong in that, top quarter, top 3 in the standings of the Illinois Central 8 Conference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on this one. I might be a little more pro Wilmington on this one from what I know and what I've seen. I mean, obviously, Wilmington having another solid year like they usually do, but it is definitely one to keep the eyeball emojis ready for.
Yeah. I think this could be an interesting matchup. Especially in the ice this week. A lot of them are lined up that they're not the most intriguing matchups. So I think like my eliminator pick and whatnot. But I think this is a good one. I think this is a chance for Herscher, win or lose, to kind of show they belong in that conversation with the Piatones and obviously the Wilmingtons and Coal Cities. They've already beat Mantino, who's kind of the other team that's in that class. So see how it turns out, Eddie. One other thing I was going to go, and I didn't have this in my notes originally. I added it real quick, and I don't have a ton to talk about on these, but we did have a couple 8-man games that I thought we could check in on before we talk some Western Big Six.
Yeah, check-in time.
Yes, check-in time. Games that deserve a mention. But a couple 8-man games. Flanagan, Cornell, Woodland is at Amboy, Lamoille, Ohio. Both those teams are 2-1. Always two teams who are kind of, I would say FCW maybe is on the cusp of that top class, and Amboy, Lamoille, when you're the 2-time defending state champ, you are that class. You are the top of the class. So I think another chance for FCW, which lost 40-20, I believe, to Polo a couple weeks ago. Another chance for them to say, hey, we deserve to be in this picture. And then, the big one, obviously, Milledgeville, comes in 3-0, visiting Polo, 3-0. The battle for the blacktop. If Sam were with us, man, he'd be so excited to talk about this one. But it's a couple good 8-man games to watch, I think. And I don't know if you have any input on those. I know they're not really your teams, Eddie, or you want to move on to Western Big Six?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick check-in on mostly on Sterling here, because to me it seems like they're in a little similar of a boat of Sycamore right now. Going into week 4, 1-2, obviously a team with a rich history, with a legacy that you don't expect 1 and 2 are the struggles. So, it's a circle the wagon point. And with a tough contest this week, Sterling is facing an undefeated East Moline team. They have 2 pretty, Metamora did handle them really easily. Sterling, that is, in week 1, 43-14. They lost to Moline last week to open up Western Big Six play. Brady Berlin's been solid passing the ball against Moline, 229 yards, 3 touchdowns, the air attack, but that was in a game that they lost by 2 touchdowns. So it's going to be interesting to see how they circle the wagons here against East Moline. I obviously I don't know if it'll be Drake Landsman or Ty Reynolds, but someone out Sockway will have that one. That's another one to definitely, I think, keep the eyeball emojis ready for on Friday night. That game, Sterling, I think their schedule isn't quite as brutal as Sycamore's is maybe going down the stretch, if we're keeping that comparison alive. But, I wouldn't bet against either of these teams in the long run. You don't bet against Sycamore and you don't bet against Sterling in the long run. So yeah. United
Township's been a kind of a surprising team this year. We talked with Kevin Klum, and he mentioned that they hadn't beaten LaSalle Peru in for the last 14 meetings or something like that, and they come through and beat them. So they're 3-0. That's a 3-0 team. But after that, it does soften up. You got Galesburg 1-2. Alamans 1-2, then you got Geneseo, Quincy back to back, 2 teams that are 2-1, and obviously about both of those programs. And then you finish with an 0-3 Rock Island team. So the opportunities here for Sterling to get well, but they're gonna want to get one of these games against a team with a winning record in order to get to that 5 wins. You don't want to count on getting in at 4-5, even though we just mentioned that they had some success doing it a couple years ago. But they want to get a United Township here so that they don't have to sweep a Geneseo and Quincy later, or however it goes out. But yeah, and then Sycamore, Sterling, teams that your eyebrows go up. Princeton 1-2, that's, it's like, if you're an NFL fan, the Chiefs being 0-2, it's like, but then you see NFL power rankings and the Chiefs are still usually in everyone's like top 6 or 7 or wherever they are. So I think you'd say the same thing about a Sterling and a Sycamore and a Princeton. I think they're going to be okay. It's early yet, so we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, the paths for all 3 teams from here on out seem to be markedly different between all 3 of them, between what they have in their remaining schedules, but they always seem to end up in the same place. So, and it's been barely a third of the season, which is what makes this so much fun.
Yeah, well, Sycamore's in that Interstate 8, and that's, and you talk about, Sterling is a team that used to be in a conference with, those Interstate 8 teams back in the day. So this is NIB 12 or so yeah, this is kind of, you wonder as conferences shake up, and we're not talking about districts, but as conferences shake up and moves go, you wonder if that's could Sterling be a good fit again, maybe for some of the schools we're talking about, for the Sycamores, for the LaSalle Perus, but we'll see how that turns out down the road. But for now, teams that are in surprising, Princeton was in a conference with Sterling for years and years too, the NCIC. So you wonder kind of how, as we go down the road, you're 1-2 now, you're a third away through the season. But man, it's like we said, Sycamore, you're in that conference, it's a tough conference. And pretty much everything we bring up with these teams that haven't gotten off to 3-0, 2-1 starts is you're going to have to beat Morris. You're going to have to beat Canelan. You're going to have to beat Rochelle. It's just a really tough path. And, Sterling, Princeton, they have a little bit easier path to recover from that tough start.
That's why they play the games. And we will be at those games. Which one are you at this week, JT?
I don't have live coverage of any. I'm planning to go over and watch a little bit of that Coal City Streeter game. And then I'll be on editing and popping stories up to the Friday Night Drive website on the evening. How about you, Eddie?
That's nice. You can handle the tweeting this week. That's an in-joke. Email me. Tweet me. I'll give you all the details of what that joke entails. But I will be at the Rochelle Sycamore game. I'm really obviously looking forward to this one up at Sycamore. Obviously, we've talked a ton about it. Both these teams need a win. So this I'm really looking forward to this one this week.
Yeah, that'll be a great environment.
So I think we could call that a podcast. He's been JT Pedelty. I've been Eddie Carifio. Thanks, guys.